When she saw me in my favourite dressing gown, she said I looked like someone off the screen. So I thought Trevor Howard, maybe Noel Coward. No, she said, it's someone else she'd seen. It was Meerkat, that bloomin' Meerkat, the one who's in those adverts on TV. Now I fear that bloomin' Meerkat is all she sees whenever she's with me. I thought I was so sophisticated, such a sexy, sultry sort of style, and my image really mattered, but it got completely shattered when I missed the mark I'd aimed for by a mile. Because of Meerkat, that bloomin' Meerkat, the one who's in those adverts on TV. Now I fear that bloomin' Meerkat is all she sees whenever she's with me. If it looked like I'd dressed in the dark, it hardly could have worked out worse for me. Now I know that she'll compare the market, 'cause any friend of Sir Guy never can be her guy. So much then for dressing to impress her, going for a look of perfect cool. She gave me a dressing down for dressing in my dressing gown, made me feel more like a perfect fool. And I blame Meerkat, that bloomin' Meerkat, the one who's in those adverts on TV. And now I fear that bloomin' Meerkat is all she sees whenever she's with me. Yes, I fear that bloomin' Meerkat is all she sees whenever she's with me. Simples. Sometimes seems that life is just a journey, your destination programmed from the start, and it's all going well as far as you can tell, but then you hear that sat-nav in your heart. Make a U-turn if possible before the road starts to descend. And if you turn, it probably won't be round the next bend, but you'll get there in the end. For this is the road to nowhere, and nowhere is nowhere to be. You really wouldn't want to go there. So to get where you need to be, eventually make a U-turn if possible, before the road starts to descend. And if you turn, it probably won't be round the next bend, but you'll get there. Make a U-turn if possible, before the road starts to descend. And if you turn, it probably won't be round the next bend, but you'll get there in the end. That's a new song. I never tell anyone it's going to be a new song before I start, in case it all goes horribly wrong. I'll tell you after. Let's just quickly here with this. when I was a little lad, though I wasn't all that bad. There's one thing that me dad told me not to do. Anytime I got too near to the telly, he would sneer, threatening to clip my ear. He'd say, listen you, don't put your fingers on the screen. No telling where they might have been. And when we see great big greasy marks, there's only one thing it can mean. So don't put your fingers on the screen. So it was ingrained in me from the age of 2 or 3. Fingering the screen would be no way to behave. And when more recently came touchscreen technology, I could hear Dad calling me from beyond the grave. He said, don't put your fingers on the screen. No telling where they might have been. And when we see great big greasy marks, there's only one thing it could mean. Don't put your fingers, your filthy little fingers, don't put your fingers on the screen. Touch screen this and touch screen that, every bit of kit seems to have a touch screen, and although I try my hardest, I just can't get used to it. Now I've got a mobile phone and a tablet of my own. Even so I can't condone what it's all about. Every time I see someone with one of those gizmos on, I become my father's son and I start to shout, "Ow, don't put your fingers on the screen. No telling where they might have been." And when we see great big greasy marks, there's only one thing it can mean. So don't put your fingers, your filthy dirty fingers, don't put your fingers on the screen. I shan't tell you again, don't put your fingers on the screen. No telling where they might have been. And when we see great big greasy marks, there's only one thing it can mean. So don't put your fingers, your filthy, dirty, nasty little greasy fingers on the screen. Good lessons, Richard. Saturday night, everyone's dressed in their Sunday best for the ball. The band's finished tuning, the crooner is crooning, it resonates round the church hall. One by one the couples start to spill out on the floor, but there's a girl who wonders what she ever came there for. Shrinking violet, hidden in the shadows of the room, unbidden as the boys come seeking dancers to be their partners. Shrinking violet, wondering what she'd say if one should ask her. Dancing round a dozen different answers, she never takes a chance. Fancy dancer who never gets to dance. Every weekday evening she takes the bedroom floor to practice to the music in her head. But it all flew out the window soon as she came through the door. Her legs have turned to jelly, feet to lead. It's easy when the mirror is your partner, but she knows reflections don't complain at you for treading on their toes. Shrinking violet, hidden in the shadows of the room, unbidden as the boys come seeking dancers to be their partners. Shrinking violet, wondering what she'd say if one should ask her, dancing round a dozen different answers. She never takes a chance, a fancy dancer who never gets to dance. And then, just like a lifeboat to the rescue, the man she's danced with many times before says, is there any chance that I could have this dance? And proudly leads his 13-year-old daughter to the floor. Shrinking violet, no longer hidden in the shadows of the room, unbidden as the boys come seeking dancers to be their partners. Shrinking violet, wondering what she'd say if one should ask her, dancing round a dozen different answers. She never takes a chance, a fancy dancer who never gets to dance. A fancy dancer, and now she gets to dance. You up for singing? You gonna do some singing with me? We'll see. When I was a kid, I never could afford to holiday abroad, but did we care? Did we buggery? We would caravan in Clacton on the sea, and that suited me. I liked it there. Lovely jubbly Granddad never came with us, and when I asked him why, this is what he'd tell me with a twinkle in his eye. Come on, you lot. Twinkle in his eye. I said, come on, you lot. Twinkle in his eye. I'm going to Stopperton, Stopperton, Stopperton. That's where I've got a permanent booking every year. I'm off to Stopperton, Stopperton, Stopperton. I'm going to Stopperton, and I wish you could be here. Dad went in the loft and got the cases out. Granddad hung about and helped us pack. Spade and bucket in, sometimes I would catch him looking wistfully as he looked at me and I looked back. Wish he'd chuck it in, Granddad, won't you come, I'd say. I'm sure we'll fit you in. But he'd say no, I can't go, as he broke into a grin. Come on. Broke into a grin. I'm going to Stopperton, Stopperton, Stopperton. That's where I've got a permanent booking every year. I'm off to Stopperton, Stopperton, Stopperton. I'm going to Stopperton, and I wish you could be here. halfway through the holiday, we'd buy some cards to write. We'd say the weather's lovely, even though it might be showers and thunder. Don't forget your granddad, Mum said, show him that you care. I'd say, Mum, don't be dumb, Granddad won't be there, your turn. Don't wait for me. Granddad won't be there, he told me. I'm going to Stopperton. That's where I got a permanent booking every year. I'm off to Stopperton. I'm going to Stopperton, and I wish you could be here. Then when we got home, he always greeted us with sweets. He treated us and said, don't tell. Mum just looked away. We would tell him all about the things we'd done. He'd say, you've caught the sun and you do look well. What a thing to say. I'd say, how was Stopperton? And he'd look so sincere. Stopperton was wonderful. I'm going back next year. Hang on a minute. Going back next year. Big one. Going back next year. Lovely. I'm going. That's where I've got a permanent booking every year. I'm off to Stopperton. I'm going to Stopperton, and I wish you could be here. I'm going to Stopperton, and I wish you could be here. Well sung. I'll do one more, one short. I think I'll do this. Yeah, I see a few people with cups in their hands out there. Let's do this. See if this rings a bell with you. When I'm in a restaurant and when I'm in a restaurant, I've had my meal and all I want to follow it will be a lovely cup of tea. I call the waiter and I say, I'll have a tea if that's okay. He smiles and says, of course. I know that smile is false. They do a load of coffees, and I've gone and asked for tea. It's a bad day at the office for the waiter and for me, 'cause it's billed as tea, but it isn't to my mind. It's billed as tea, but it's nothing of the kind. When I want a great big steaming mug of Rosie Lee, it's billed as tea, but it isn't builder's tea. They bring a silly bowl-shaped cup that they have filled 3/4 up with water that is not particularly hot. With a tea bag on the side, they haven't even tried to hide their obvious disdain for being such a pain. They haven't even made it, they've just brought it out in bits, as if I'd be persuaded that my tea should come in kits. It's billed as tea, but it isn't to my mind. It's billed as tea, but it's nothing of the kind. When I want a great big steaming mug of Rosie Lee, it's billed as tea, but it isn't builder's tea. So, don't ask me why it's so naff compared with any local caff, and so I'd just as soon be in that greasy spoon where they do old-fashioned nosh that couldn't be described as posh, and a proper cup of char, a better one by far than they give you when you go in places where they do a much more fancy menu. But when they bring you a brew, it's billed as tea, but it isn't to my mind. It's billed as tea, but it's nothing of the kind. when I want a great big steaming mug of rosy lee. It's builder's tea, but it isn't builder's tea. It's builder's tea, but it isn't builder's tea. Thank you very much. See you later.